I know you're worried about protecting democracy, and you've been very outspoken. You have opposed both bills from the Democratic Party that are intended to strengthen protection for voters, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a bill reinstating the Justice Department's power to block some states and localities from enacting what they view as discriminatory voting rules. Why did you not support those bills? And is there a bipartisan effort that you and other Republicans could get behind that could actually protect the rights of voters and get through the House and Senate for President Biden to sign?
I certainly hope there is. I think there is. I think there's been discussions in the Senate from last I've heard. Look, you can call a bill the Voting Rights Act, and then left-wing Twitter goes nuts about this, by the way, and they can say you voted against voting rights without even looking to the details of this. So the quick details, the Voting Rights Act in the mid-60s came out with a temporary provision called pre-clearance, which required certain states to get clearance for any changes to any election system that they did. That went on into perpetuity. It was intended to be temporary. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court threw that provision out and said, history changes. We can't keep pretending like it's 1965. And so for the last 8 years, we have not had that provision in. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would simply put to re-implement that provision to have, again, the Justice Department make any approval to any changes. By the way, that would have been the Trump Justice Department and anything like that. So yes, we can get to a solution. The problem is, I admonish my side all the time about playing politics. The Democrats have to quit playing politics on some of this too. You can call it the For the People's Act, which was the other one, and really what that is public funding for campaigns, among other whole host of things. If we actually went into this as adults with real discussions, I think we can solve stuff. But instead we just wait for these Twitter comments of, Adam voted against whatever, and then I can put a bill out there, the God and Puppies Act, and see people vote against that and say they're against God and puppies.
This is Republican Adam Kinzinger, who, objectively speaking, is the most moderate Republican in the House. And yet, even still, when asked why he doesn't support any voting rights legislation, only managed to respond with word salad and verbal gymnastics without actually answering the question. Now, Kinzinger's point here isn't exactly clear, but he's either saying that Democrats basically see the words voting rights and take it all as sacrosanct instead of looking at the actual provisions of the legislation, or he's saying that the Voting Rights Act would simply be a re-implementation of temporary pre-clearance provisions from the Civil Rights Act, and somehow that makes it less valid. But either way, his point doesn't hold any water, and here's why. Now, pre-clearance was the core provision of the Voting Rights Act. It made it a requirement that states with a history of voter discrimination to pre-clear changes with their election rules with the federal government. And that was a factor in helping secure the right to vote for hundreds of thousands of people in 14 states. And yet, fast forward 50 years, people claim that it was unnecessary, that racism was solved, that this isn't the same country as it was in the 1960s. But all you have to do to be able to recognize how effective pre-clearance was is to look at what happened immediately after it was eliminated. In 2013, when the Supreme Court struck down pre-clearance in Shelby County versus Holder by a 5-4 decision, within 24 hours, one day, Texas announced a strict photo ID law. Mississippi and Alabama also began enforcing photo ID laws. North Carolina enacted a voting bill that implemented a strict photo ID requirement, curtailed early voting, eliminated same-day registration, pre-registration, annual voter registration drives, and the ability to keep polls open for an additional hour. In total, 1,688 polling places that were originally protected by the Voting Rights Act were shut down. Of the 757 counties covered by pre-clearance, 298 of them, or 39%, reduced the number of polling places between 2012 and 2018. That is the impact of ending pre-clearance. The answer is right there in black and white. So you might claim beforehand that the Voting Rights Act is unnecessary or that this is a different country from the 1960s, but when the immediate impact of taking away pre-clearance is discriminatory laws and poll closures, then that's the proof that in fact this country today is no different from the 1960s, and that given the opportunity to disenfranchise minority voters, still conservatives will do exactly that. Kinzinger then goes on to claim that the For the People Act does nothing more than public funding for campaigns. Now, first of all, that's not even close to being only what the For the People Act does. That bill would curb voter suppression. It would make it easier for Americans to register to vote by implementing same-day registration and automatic voter registration. It would ban partisan gerrymanders and require independent redistricting commissions. It would restrict voter roll purges without prior verification. It would require presidential tax returns to be released. It would mandate paper ballots to increase election security, would crack down on voter intimidation, and yes, it would create a public financing system that is designed to diminish the enormous and disproportionate influence of PACs and corporate spending in federal elections, which has completely diluted the voices of regular Americans. When you yourself donate $25 to a candidate, you've got to be kidding yourself if you think that goes even a fraction as far as the millions upon millions dumped into these races by massive special interests. The For the People Act sought to remedy exactly that, and I get that Republicans like to fearmonger about this being some big government takeover of elections, but our elections have already been taken over. Only it's not by the government, it is by the ultra-rich and corporations who will cherry-pick politicians based on how beneficial they'll be for themselves personally. Kinzinger even goes on to attack Democrats for, quote, playing politics. But how exactly is trying to pass the Voting Rights Act playing politics? This is the same bill that was extended by Republican President Richard Nixon in 1970, and then extended again by Republican President Gerald Ford in 1975, and extended again by Republican President Ronald Reagan in 1982, and then extended again by Congress in 2006, including a unanimous 98-0 vote in the Senate, which was signed by Republican President George W. Bush. So the fact that not a single Republican can find it in themselves to support it now should really beg the question, which party exactly is it that's suddenly playing politics? And look, I don't want to bash Adam Kinzinger just for the sake of doing it, because I do think that he generally is reasonable and he has cast votes that took courage to cast. Irrespective of the fact that they were the right thing to do, you've still got to at least admit that they weren't an easy vote for a Republican to take. And frankly, if more Republicans were like him, we wouldn't be in the position as a country that we're in today. But still, that doesn't absolve him of being on the wrong side of this issue, which is especially ironic because it's Adam Kinzinger who's most loudly condemned Trump's big lie. And yet, for some reason, he's supporting the consequences of the big lie, which is the GOP's assault on voting rights. In other words, he claims to be against Trump pretending that he won an election that he lost, but when Republicans use that lie as justification to then pass restrictive voter suppression laws under the pretense of voter integrity, well, that part is fine. It doesn't really do much to condemn the big lie if you're going to just turn around and defend the ultimate goal of the big lie. We don't need lip service, we need people willing to fight for democracy all the way through, even the part where it comes time to cast votes for it. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.